Okay, what is the need to harness the traditional knowledge? One is to protect it against misappropriation and biopiracy, and second one is to reverse the decline and loss of traditional knowledge. So we have seen that the features of the traditional knowledge is such that there is a lack of documentation. So this leads to misappropriation and biopiracy. And we have also seen that the younger generation are not aware of the traditional knowledge because and only the holders, the traditional knowledge holders or the elders, there is a decline in the practicing of this traditional knowledge. So we need to protect against these two threats. So what is biopiracy? It is the process by which the rights to the genetic resource and knowledge are erased and assumed by those who have exploited the indigenous knowledge and biodiversity, and misappropriation of the traditional knowledge for the purpose of seeking exclusive patent ownership over that knowledge. So now we are going to see few examples of this biopiracy and misappropriation, and then how these cases have turned out to be a reason for creating a protection mechanism for this traditional knowledge. So the first case is the Ayusha drink. So this is the Amazon basin people have used for over generations a particular bark of a tree, and they made a wine which they called as Ayusha. So it is a belief of those people that it will heal and diagnose or treat illness to meet with spirits and divine future. So as such, it has a chemical component in it which is called as dimethyltryptamine. So it will protect the brain cells and simulate neural cell growth. Having known this scientific information, the American company has patented it in 1986 in spite of the COICA, so which is the body or the forum for the indigenous organizations in the Amazon basin. In spite of their uh, getting against this patent, they could not get the patent revoked or get the benefits of this. So this is because there is no clear law that protects the genetic resources. Also, there is no documentation. So these things had led to them to lose their ownership. So next, this has created an awareness, and there should be a protection mechanism. This is where it started. Similarly, from the Kalahari Desert of South Africa, the Sans people who lived there were using a plant called Hoodia cactus, and they used it to suppress the appetite. So you can see that a San tribeman who eats it. So they use this particular cactus to suppress the appetite for a longer time. But the same thing was patented by the CSIR and the UK biotech company, also Pfizer. So having known this, the people had fought for it. They have received a share of money for their royalties, but it was a very small percentage of the eventual sales. So it was told that they did not know that it is a practice. There were no documentation, and they said that it is their own innovation. So this is another case of biopiracy. So the third one is very relevant to our Indian custom. So in 1995, two Indian nationals at the University of Mississippi, they have were granted the patent for the use of turmeric in wound healing. And Indian Council of Scientific and Industrial Research (CSIR) requested the USPTO to re-examine the patent. It argued that turmeric has been used for thousands of years for healing wounds and rashes, and therefore in medicinal use was not new. So this claim was supported by the documentary evidence from the including ancient Sanskrit texts and a paper published in 1953 with the Ayurveda. Despite these arguments, the USPTO upheld the CSIR objections and revoked the patent. So there was a win in this particular case, but it was after a long time fight, and they were able to win this case because of the paper, the documentation. So in spite of the documentation, it was argued that all these were in a particular language which we do not know. This has been practiced in a particular place which we do not know, kind of thing. And so there was a need of this documentation in a centralized way. Next is the more recent Jallikattu. So you all might have heard of this Jallikattu case, wherein a case was filed by the People for Ethical Treatment of Animals PETA to ban Jallikattu. Jallikattu has been a practice in Tamil Nadu to identify a stronger genetic resource, livestock or breed conservation. So the livestock census report itself has failed to register many of such a breed. So, and this has, by stopping this, there were like the core argument of the pro Jallikattu activists is that it is helps to preserve the indigenous breeds. So even to support that it is an indigenous breed, we do not have a proper documentation on it, and there were a lot of biases and errors. So that also forms a part for this misappropriation. And like this, there were other traditional plants patented traditional plants in India and in other countries like the Kumari, Amaltaz, Harad, Aswagandha, like that. So, and in agriculture, again agricultural practices, they originate from the indigenous or traditional knowledge, and there is no particular IPR that brings the knowledge producers close to research based producers. So there lies a knowledge gap. Again, the pharmaceuticals and biotech, they use many of the Ayurvedic informations. However, they are bioprospecting it. Hence, to protect them, there was a need for an intellectual property right. So by now, we have seen the economic importance of traditional knowledge and the threats or the biopiracies that has happened. So to protect them, we require a means, a legal means or legal tool by which we can protect. So the first one is the intellectual property. In general, intellectual property, it includes intangible creations of the human intellect like invention, literary and artistic works. So the well-known types are copyrights, that is creative works, patents for innovations, trademarks for brand names, and they are all private properties and can be sold or purchased or mortgaged. Geographical indication is a one which is a public property which cannot be sold or licensed. So now we need to have this intellectual property or copyright or patent for the traditional knowledge. So To do so, there was few forums which have done. When it comes before understanding the intellectual property, right, there are two types of protection mechanisms. One is the defensive protection and another one is positive protection. So defensive protection aims to stop people outside the community from acquiring intellectual property rights over traditional knowledge. So it prevents the third party from misappropriating. So how this can be done? So a set of planning which prevents the unfair and unauthorized use. So you can have an IPR or a strategy for the revision of IPR, documentation which tells that yes, we are the holders of this knowledge and you need to get permission before you use it for an innovation. So this is a defensive strategy. So the modes are by means of patents and traditional knowledge database we can do it. So there is another thing called positive protection. So what is positive protection? This is granting of rights that empower the communities to promote their traditional knowledge, control its users, and benefit from commercial exploitation. So this is also through IPRs or sui generis legislation. So what is the difference between defensive and positive? So defensive is when someone else have prospected or when someone else have taken the ownership, you need to defend your authority by showing the documentation, by showing the practices and proving your ownership. So that basically comes out of proving your authority. Positive protection is keeping it known to others that you are the owner well before anyone could use it or could take the ownership. So that is positive protection that requires a sui generis legislation. Sui generis means of its own kind. So sui generis legislation or the one of it or unique kind of legislation is required because each community will be practicing a certain traditional knowledge which may be practiced by more than one group also, right? So the way how we do it and the value attached to it all should be mentioned and it should help them in such a way that it empowers the community to promote the traditional knowledge and control the exploitation, commercial exploitation. So that is the idea of positive protection. So which are the legal bodies instituted for protecting the traditional knowledge? One is WIPO. So that is World Intellectual Properties Organization. It's a global forum for IP services. So it is Intergovernmental Committee on Intellectual Property and Genetic Resource. So it also works on the traditional knowledge of folklore committee work. So there are three things that it will do. One is traditional knowledge in the strict sense. That is technical know-how, practice skills, innovations related to the traditional knowledge like the biodiversity, agriculture or health. The second one is the traditional or cultural expressions of folklore. And third one is on genetic resources. So under the WIPO, you have the Convention on Biological Diversity. So it's a multilateral treaty. It has three main goals. One is for the conservation of biological diversity, sustainable use of its components, fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from genetic resources. So it is based on sustainable development. So the CBD has 4 main articles which talks about this. So Article 18 talks about the technological cooperation. Article 8J talks about the framework provision. Article 10 about the customary use. And Article 17 about the exchange of information. So one of the protocol in CBD is the Nagoya Protocol. It's a supplementary agreement. It provides transparent legal framework for effective implementation of fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising by the utilization of genetic resources. See, genetic resources, they are natural and hence one cannot claim the ownership. However, if the genetic resource is used by a certain community or certain society for as a traditional knowledge, then they should get a fair and equitable sharing of benefits. So it addresses the traditional knowledge associated with genetic resource. That is the Nagoya Protocol. So another one is trade related aspects of intellectual property rights, that is TRIPS. So this is under the World Trade Organization. It's also the international legal agreement, specifically the Doha Declaration 2001, paragraph 19. It emphasizes on the traditional knowledge and broadened negotiations. So, a few more legal tools which is available in India are the PVFR, that is the Plant Varieties and Farmers' Rights, Geographical Indication, Traditional Knowledge Digital Library, and few other databases like ICMR database, Environment Information System, National Institute of Science, Communication and Information Resources, and the legal bodies like National Biodiversity Authority, State Biodiversity Board, and Biodiversity Management Committee. As such, under the CBD, you need to create a different legal bodies across the nation. So, nationwide it is NBA. So, under the NBA, different states will come, that is State Biodiversity Board. Under the state, the districts will come where you have the Biodiversity Management Committee. So, the PVFR or the Protection of Plant Varieties. So, it gives unique rights for the farmers and plant breeders. They encourage the development and cultivation of new varieties of plants, benefit sharing and compensation for traditional, rural and tribal communities by protecting the traditional rights of farmers. So, in 2001, this PVFR, that is Plant Variety and Farmers' Right Act, has been enacted. So it is a sui generis system, that is a unique system. It is attempted by the Indian government to recognize and protect the rights of both commercial plant breeders and farmers. Period of protection of the fleet is between 15 years for trees and vines, 18 years. So you can have the idea of this once you go through with this Plant Variety and Farmers' Rights Act. The geographical indication, as we told, it's a public property or name or sign used on the product. It corresponds to specific geographical location. So by giving this, you are giving it as a positive protection, because unlike the trademarks or copyrights, it's a public property. It cannot be sold or licensed. So Article 22.1 of the TRIPS agreement defines the geographical indication. So why this geographical indication is important? Because it gives a positive protection to the local community. So it is providing the benefit sharing. So the product will become more popular for the special characteristics or quality. Now we are going to see few of the geographically tagged items. The Kadaknath chicken. Similarly, Goa Fini. It is the first liquor product in the country to obtain heritage drink status. It got its GI certification in 2000. And Karnataka is leading in filing geographical indications with a total of 39 GS registered, followed by Tamil Nadu and Kerala. So you have here few of the geographical indication tag marked items. Specifically, when you see the Darjeeling tea, it is the first product to have the GI tag. And not only the Darjeeling, as you know, it is the geographical indication. And Darjeeling tea, it is not only the name but also the symbol, both were geographically tagged. So like this you have several other GI tag food items. Not only food items, you will have, it is not specifically for food items. You can even have a sari like Mysore silk and all. So you can just try it out for your own regions. So the next one is the Traditional Knowledge Digital Library. It is India is the first country to initiate such a database. It involves documentation of traditional knowledge available in the public domain in the form of existing literatures related to Ayurveda, Unani, Siddha and Yoga, digitized in 5 international languages, namely English, German, French, Japanese and Spanish. So it contains scanned images of over 2 lakh medicinal formulations from the original books. It gives legitimacy to the existing traditional knowledge and protection of such information from getting patented by unauthorized party. So TKDL works both as a positive as well as defensive protection mechanism. Similarly, ICMR has documented about 500 medicinal plants by traditional practitioners in 5 states across the Western Ghats. So you can have different ethno-medicinal usages. EIS, that is, ENVIS is the Environment Information System. So it is established to create the network that talks about collect and store and disseminate information related to environment and accordingly the traditional knowledge related to the environment. So the National Biodiversity Authority, so it is enacted through the Biological Diversity Act in 2002. So it will advise the government on issues of biodiversity and its conversion. So the act also implemented at state level through state biodiversity boards and local level through biodiversity management committees. So you have again People's Biodiversity Register will be there, which documents all these biodiversity related information. NISSIR is another, the Indian Journal of Traditional Knowledge is published by this NISSIR. So they do have information on folk remedies, ethnobiology, ethnomedicine, ethnopharmacognosy and clinical studies of efficacy. So apart from this, we have few examples where the Indian government, how it harnesses the traditional knowledge. So first thing is on benefit sharing. So the Indian example is that during an ethnobotanical expedition, the Kani community in the Western Ghats of Kerala, so they used a seed of a wild plant called Trichoccus silopis. So it is Arogya Pacha is called locally. So from that knowledge of Kani, they created, scientists have created a drug called Jeevani and they have released it for commercial production in 1995. So while transferring the technology for production of the drug to a pharmaceutical firm, Trivandrum Botanical Garden is the one who have invented the Jeevani, while the basic knowledge of it is from the Kani community, to share the license fee on a 50-50 basis. In addition to this, 2% of the royalties from the sales to go to the tribal community. So the models was developed over a period of 12 years from 87 to 99 and in full consultation with the Kani tribe. So now you have the Jeevani, a product of Aryavaidya Pharmacy. So it is like the commercial production was by the Aryavaidya Pharmacy. It's an Indian company. So indigenous people, they are as such natural resource managers. They are 5% of the population, but they take care of 80% of the world's biodiversity. Manusmriti, an ancient Sanskrit text, it gives references to direct and indirect instructions about the conservation of plants and animals. So the local community, they have the control of this traditional knowledge. So, empowering local communities is one way to harness the traditional knowledge. So, how Indian government has helped is by one of the example is the reclamation of sodic soils in the Satara village in Hardoi districts of Uttar Pradesh. So, wherein you can see the picture, wherein due to tsunami, the soil was salted and was not useful for cultivation, while the major constraint was a result of inappropriate irrigation management and brown plant hoppers. So, by combining local and modern knowledge, farmers reclaimed over 68,000 of hectares of land. So, it is the local farmers who have given their idea, and they have done they have reclaimed the soil, and the traditional knowledge of the local farmers was very crucial in this case. So, similarly, there was an Irula cooperative society for anti-venom drug. So, around 1970s, there were lots of death in India due to snake bite. So, it is at that time people wanted to have venom, anti-venom institutes were instituted, but they do require the snake so that they can extract the poison out of it and treat it. So, to extract that venom, they needed the snake catchers. So, the Irulas are the snake catching tribes in the Western Ghats. So, and they have spread across the Tamil Nadu. So, the Irula Snake Catchers Cooperative Society on the outskirts of the Chennai, they have revolutionized the treatment by producing large anti-venom supply. So, this YouTube video will give you the information, more information on it. You can go through with that. Again, the local tribal or Adivasi communities, they have the exclusive right to collect the non-timber forest produce. That's how they acknowledge their right and their customary role on the conservation. So, at the national and state level, you have incentives and infrastructural support. So, the central cottage industries supported by the United Nations Development, they have led to a new range of carpet design using vegetable dyes. Scheme of Fund for Regeneration of Traditional Industries. It is an initiative by the Ministry of MSME to promote the cluster development. The Khadi Gramodyak Bhavans or the heading this over. And KVIC is a demonstration of India's commitment to preserve its traditional knowledge. So, Indigenous Games and Marital Arts IGMA scheme is instituted by the National Sports Talent Concerts, also Khelo India scheme. It has been implemented to promote rural and indigenous sports. So, there are different indigenous sports that you can see here. The Malakambam, Silambam, Kabaddi and all. And the Padma Awards recognize achievements in the fields of propagation of India, culture, protection of human rights, wildlife protection and conservation. So, here also different traditional expressions were recognized and respected. And there is a joint forest management program wherein the local community